Hi, I'm JR with thebaynet.com, and I'm joined by David Thompson, a local author who's written 2 books about Moll Dyer and the Dyer family. How are you doing today,
I'm
Mr.
doing
Thompson?
well. How are you?
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the story of Moll Dyer?
Oh, well, it's a story that's, especially for folks of my generation, being a native son and all, that I've heard since I was a very little boy, whether it was just something of historical note for a lot of folks, for others it's been a cautionary tale told around campfires and that sort of thing. First of all, I guess I should explain that there's very little historical record about Moll Dyer. We have a run that's named after, a road that's named after, the huge rock, of course, down at the old courthouse. We have a letter written from colonial times describing her as being so ugly it hurts to behold her. And other than that, with the courthouse burning down, there isn't a lot known of her story. So anyway, essentially, the story is she came here alone from Ireland in the mid-1600s. She wasn't particularly well received by the colonists at the time, as she was different on many levels. She also practiced herbal medicine, and she much preferred the company of the Native American tribes than she did to her own European colonists. There was a 3-year drought in the late 1600s, and this, of course, was pretty much on the heels of the Salem trials, which were in 1692. And the colonists essentially blamed it on her. You know, she was different. She was a witch. She had to go. So on that fated night in 1697, which was described as the coldest night of the year, a mob of local colonists decided it was time to run her out. And even the Governor Blackston at the time kind of gave his agreement with doing so, and stating that there wasn't much the law could do, but you know, maybe you could take care of matters yourself, because he had just come here from Annapolis. The county seat had been, or the state capital rather, had just been moved 3 years prior. And so he came down from Anne Arundel Town, as it was called then, and almost immediately his wife and children took ill, gravely ill. And the colonists told him, hey, it's Moll Dyer. She's a witch. She did this. So that's what they did on that night. They got together with their pitchforks and torches and went out to her cabin on Moll Dyer Road. I'm sure it wasn't named that then. And set it ablaze. And Moll managed to escape running through the woods behind the back of the property, and ended up near the river, where she froze to death. A young lad out looking for his cow found her 3 days later, frozen to the rock, one hand supposedly embedded in the stone, along with an imprint of her knee, and another hand raised in, as if in fury or supplication, I don't know. And that's how it ends. We have the rock that I've seen pictures of from the 30s. It was much more legible, or much more visible, the prints, but being sandstone, being out in the weather, it hasn't held up real well for that.
Do you talk to a lot of people who have had experiences around where her cabin was or the river?
Well, there's quite a few reports, even from the newspapers over time, about accidents that have been held there. I wanted to get a lot of the perspective from local families, so I started a Moll Dyer fan page on Facebook, and I garnered a lot of input from local families, and also from just going around talking to folks. I found that a lot of people didn't want to post it directly in their name, but would DM me with information that they had and what their family said. And a lot of those tales is what drives the plot in my book. Essentially, there are paranormal elements. That's the way you can't have a Moll Dyer story without paranormal elements. But if you took those parts out, I think you would find it was very close to what she did experience.
Are there any interactions with Moll Dyer's spirit or whatever that stand out to you, like from the Facebook page or just talking to people?
Yeah, one in particular from someone that I know pretty well personally was hiking in the area, and right at the edge of dark, or the gloaming, I guess you would say, he had a experience with a very thick, misty-like fog that was following the run down, and it was going against the breeze, and it didn't seem to follow any natural movement.
Mm-hmm.
And beside it was an equally distinct misty fog that he attributed it to being Moll Dyer's dog, which is also part of the mythology associated with her.
Are there any other sort of witch trials or anything like that in Southern Maryland that happened around
Oh
the
yeah,
same
we
time?
were a hotbed for it, I believe. There were only 12 in Maryland recorded, period, and 3 or 4 of them were in St. Mary's or Calvert. And Calvert was the only witch who was ever hanged by virtue of actually having a trial in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
That was Rebecca Fowler. That was a few years before Moll Dyer. And there was also a Mary Lee who was hanged on shipboard en route to St. Mary's County on board the English trading ship, the Charity, who was also bringing some folks that were wanting to colonize in St. Mary's City. And a 3-day storm came up and was just tossing this ship all around, and the seamen decided that this old reclusive woman was the responsible party. So yes, they hanged her without benefit of trial.
When you go to write these books, what's like your process? Like what got you into them, I guess, more or less, is what I'm trying to ask.
One of my fondest memories from childhood was
Mm-hmm.
listening to tales of Moll Dyer. You know, initially they kind of send a shiver up your spine, and
Yeah.
later on you're like, wow, we did that to that poor that poor woman, you know. And having ancestors that were here at the time, to some extent I felt a little bit responsible myself, if
Mm-hmm.
you can relate to that. And I thought we were long overdue for a retelling of the Moll Dyer story.
Do you have plans for a third book on Moll Dyer?
I do. In fact, the first book actually is Moll Dyer exclusively. It's told from her point of view, 98% of it anyway. The second book is His Father's Blood, which follows actually Moll Dyer's descendant about 100 years later. And I have a third book that I've done a rough draft on. I keep going back to it because I'm still not quite satisfied with my editing process. But it will be close to a modern tale. And Moll does appear in all of them, however.
Gotcha. When I was looking up the stuff about the story, it was classified as historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's an accurate sort of?
If you take,
Category
as
for
I
it.
was saying initially, if you took out the paranormal parts, I think you would have a very real picture of what life was here and what life was like for her. I mean, she was, from my understanding and all the legends associated with her, she was a very progressive woman for a time. Being an herbalist, being enamored with the Native Americans, that's 3 strikes, you're out.
Yeah. Where can anyone who wants to read anything by you find your books?
Probably the easiest spot is Amazon. They're also on Barnes & Noble and even Walmart, but I think they have to probably order them also.
Gotcha.
So
Well, thank you for joining me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Do you want to add anything or talk about anything you're working on at the moment? Anything coming up?
I do have a third book that I hope to have finished and out by the spring. I did a dystopian novella, post-apocalyptic, being a big fan of Walking Dead. That will give a different perspective, I think, on zombies that I just recently published less than a month ago, I think. I did also want to mention that available free for Kindle and ebook readers, I have both Sister Witch, as well as his father's blood, available from the 30th of October to the 3rd of November. And there will be a book signing on the first part of November at the White Rabbit in Leonardtown. And this will be to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the publication of Sister Witch. Thank you very much.
So thank you for watching. We were joined by David Thompson, a local author who's written 2 books, Sister Witch, The Life of Moll Dyer, and His Father's Blood. And he has a 3rd one that he's working on, so look forward to that.